everyone. It's so great to be back for yet another episode in our AWS Connection series on supply chain. My name is Michael Palermo with the Developer Relations team at Here, and with me is Vidhan. Vidhan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Michael.
I'm
How are
good.
you?
But I would think you should be feeling great today. Let me tell everyone why. Earlier in the day, we had like a big company-wide global meeting, and during that meeting, the CEO calls out Vidhan for his excellence recently in all his activities. So, yay, Vidhan, you're a rock star. I said you are a celebrity, even though you don't believe me. Awesome stuff. So I guess I'd have to ask you, you're not one who goes around and touts and draws attention to yourself. You're a down-to-earth good guy. But let me ask you from this perspective, of the activities that were recognized that you've done, what were the ones that you were like maybe more passionate about or really enjoyed?
Okay, so one of the activity that I enjoyed very much was something to do with machine learning AI, which is basically image recognition. And it was a simple thing. We had IBM's Watson's image recognition model, and we recognized the food image, and then we connected it with our location services, and we got the result as places nearby us, which serves that particular food. And that was one of the, you can say that part, which I enjoyed a lot building with the IBM team.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. That sounds like a very nerdy, cool thing to do.
Yeah.
So, but once again, just want to make it clear, hats off for being recognized. Have the CEO of the company call you out. That's pretty cool. All right. So Vidhan, before we get right into the whole retail, aspect of things, which is what this episode is about, I've been trying to think of clever questions to ask just to let people peer a little bit into personal lives. And so here's my question for you today. During this year, 2020, can you tell me what has been the most common clothing item you have been wearing?
Okay, that is an interesting question. This year, almost we all have been at home, right? We didn't go out much. Everybody in the world, right? And one piece of a cloth that I wore the most is, I would say, sports shorts, because they are comfortable and they're good.
Exactly. I mean, sports shorts, you mean like for like soccer, football type shorts?
Yeah, that kind of a, but a good, comfortable material.
Yeah, I agree. So you know what?
And
We have something in common there because,
mhm.
and certainly my family could attest to this. My most commonly worn item this year has been, again, the most comfortable track pants. They're just they're just lounge worthy. They're great. I'd be interested for those that are following along right now. Have the guts. Let us know what has been the most common thing you've been wearing. We want to know. We really do. So tell us, and we'll
Yeah.
do a shout out. Okay, so while they're thinking about that or thinking if they have the courage to actually put that into the chat, I want to do a little recap of what we have been discussing so far. We are in episode 3. So in the series, we're kind of at the reaching this halfway point. And what have we been doing so far? We have been discussing, first of all, the overall architecture of a supply chain scenario. And the last time you and I did episode 2, it was on transportation, and we were able to dive a little bit into the MQTT stuff and
Yeah.
also some front end stuff with regard to the vehicles that are going to be used in the scenario. Was there any highlights from that episode that you particularly caught your attention?
To be honest, I was like, I loved it. I loved that part where you were dragging the marker and you were sending the lat long data to the AWS, and that was amazing. And I loved it. I was quite excited, and I'm excited today also because we're going to build on top
Yeah,
of that,
I've
right?
noticed that with regard to a couple of the responses that we've had, by the way, first of all, there's some unknown voice that controls all of these things that said everyone's answer should be sweats.
Yeah.
Then there's also this notion, and I actually respect Richard for saying this, that he's just here for the MQTT stuff, but I still think he should have the guts to answer that question. And then basketball shorts also for Rawthorn. So I'm telling you, that looks like a popular one. It looks like a winner.
Yeah, shorts all day.
Exactly. Okay, so right before we start diving into the code, which is I'm sure what Richard would prefer us to do, I wanted to also just walk through briefly a scenario for retail. I mean, this whole episode is going to be retail. I consider this, and it's perfectly placed in the episode series because it is literally the bridge of everything with regard to this scenario. But retail, let's walk through one common scenario. It would
Okay.
be a customer wants a product, they order that product from a retailer, the retailer provides the ability for that product to be delivered to the delivery address the consumer specifies. Seem pretty simple?
Yeah,
Okay.
it does sound simple. Yep.
So, but would you agree with me that it doesn't always work that way?
I would agree on that.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that example, the consumer is ordering directly from the retailer, which, by the way, is also going to be what happens in our scenario for this series.
Mhm.
But can you think of an example, Vidhan, of when someone is ordering something, a product, but it's not actually directly through the retailer themselves?
So what I have experienced during this scenario, like COVID situation, is that I open an app, right, and I simply place an order, and that stuff, goods comes in a 24-hour at my doorstep. That is one scenario that I face. So I think it is not directly from a retailer. There's a middleman, the application company, who are providing me that
Right.
particular stuff from the retailer. And second thing that my parents do is simply call the retail shop, and that guy takes up the order and delivers it in 1 hour or 2 hour.
Right. I mean, let's face it. That sounds almost like a typical maybe Amazon scenario, right? Where people will
Yeah.
place their orders, maybe not directly with the retailer, but through this middle layer. And another scenario that might be common to some, it's been very common to me lately, is that if I want to order food, I could open up an app food delivery service. So the app is actually not tied to any one or place to get food, but a variety, such as like a DoorDash or Uber Eats or Grubhub, any one of those type of food delivery. Again, you're going through the delivery service really to order the food, and they're going to fulfill that order on your behalf and then deliver it to you. Whereas sometimes a pizza company may have its own delivery app. So you are now, again, directly placing an order for the product you want with the retailer in that example. So I just wanted to make sure that we had a few of those scenarios talked out, and then make it clear that in this particular scenario, the consumer will order from a retailer. The retailer is going to have the fulfillment of the product delivery done by an external ultimate delivery company. And that's going to be our little supply chain last mile scenario. However, right before we get into even that, one more thing for you, Vidhan. Uh, what would you say in bigger scenarios? So ours is more simple, but in a bigger scenario, maybe like an Amazon where there's so many warehouses or so many areas for like where products can be sourced. How do you think that they determine where the best place is to source to source the product that the consumer ultimately wants?
So what I have experienced, first I'll tell you what I've experienced is if order something, let's say from Amazon, right, and they have a date, right, that they can deliver it in 1 day or 2 day or 3 days, right, and they do it before that. And what I think, and if I have something like that what I would have is I would have the population density of a particular area. I would have connected it with the purchasing capabilities and the past orders which have been made. And accordingly, I would have searched or selected a sweet spot where I can build a particular warehouse, or I can select from that particular area the retailers who can provide that good. So I think that should be the way that it should work.
Yeah. So this is what makes the whole supply chain topic very interesting, is that there are so many scenarios depending on the complexity of the entire situation. Whether the product is available in mass, whether there's a shortage, whether there's quantities at various distribution centers, or if there's a limited area for that. So anyway, are you still there with me, Vidhan? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm here.
All
I'm
right,
here.
just making sure. Okay, so what I would like to do now is take us on a journey into code. So we're going to go into our code view, and I intentionally wanted to create a scenario in the code that would be a little similar to what we already experienced in the previous episode, for a couple reasons. I think you said that you liked the idea that the transportation vehicles could be dragged and dropped on the map, for movement. In this
I loved it.
situation, you did. So I'm going to employ something very similar for the retailer, but keep in mind that the only reason for that is because I'm not trying to introduce this complexity that the retailer is like on some mobile bus, which there are some that do that. Even Amazon has a bus that will, park itself somewhere and people can go to it. But I'm just talking about for the initial address of the retailer, we will do one single drag and drop, basically, to a location, which makes it so that when we have this
Okay.
complete scenario finished, we can experiment with multiple situations. What if the retailer were over here versus there? So I'm wanting to say we're going to incorporate some of that, right? What we did from last time.
Okay.
Also, a note, since we've had that discussion, our retail locations in this scenario are also the same locations where the product is sourced from. So we're not introducing warehouses and distribution centers or a lot, we're simply just going to say if they order it from that location, it will be from that location that the product is going to be, sourced and delivered from. So on the screen, I have basically I have the HTML body portion showing of what we're going to be building today. And it's very simple. In fact, if I were to go over right now into the screen that shows the, what this looks like right now, that's how simple it is. It
Oh,
literally is just
a drop down.
a drop down. That's it, right? So I mean, nothing fancy, but so I could choose. And now if I choose one, really, there's nothing happening right now
Yeah.
because that's what we're going to do. We're going to build the code that's going to make this possible, and we're going to sync it all up by the end of the episode through some MQTT stuff. So that will set the stage for what we'll be doing next. So let me get in here. I also want to just highlight in the head section that there is quite a few things that are being referenced. All the here.js 3.1 links are so that we could do all the JavaScript client-side stuff that we're doing. All the resources for AWS IoT, those resources are also included. Some of them are for the protocol for MQTT specifically, and the one on line 17 is really just the core services that are involved with the AWS developer, kit. So
I have never used these libraries, but they look interesting. I can see cryptography, that is for encryption, decryption. I can see Bahu MQTT, that's interesting. And AWS SDK, amazing.
yeah, you know what? And the reason why those are all here is because as we discussed in the first episode, or I'm sorry, episode number 2, which was on transportation, we discussed that building the endpoint for MQTT communications, that initial building of that endpoint with all the credentials is probably the toughest task. Once you have that all done, it's a piece of cake. But you
Okay.
have to utilize these things in order to do the proper signing of things and having that handshake between all the endpoints. So that's what they're there for.
Okay.
So there will actually be no other changes to this page. It's just being shown as a reference. You didn't see it. We do have a div to represent a map, but you'll notice that we have display none on line 21 in the style. So we're saying, yes, let's have a map, and yes, let's not show it.
Okay.
Why would we do something crazy like that? Stay tuned. And then also we have a reference here to the demo app.js file. That's this file. This is where we have these initial, this is like our boilerplate code in most of our examples at developer.here.com on all the typical things that you would get set up. So nothing really special going on in this code, except for a few things that I'll just quickly highlight. One, I have created a specific geopoint on line 11 to a very specific address in the Seattle area. And when I say address, I just mean a point. Like
Okay.
literally, it's not an address. It's just like where I want to have the center of the screen. And I use that init point in a few other areas in code. You can see that I'm using it to center the map. And then down here, I've also done something that's not part of our boilerplate code, but it's allowing me to add an external YAML file, which is kind of interesting because the last time I pronounced it YAML, I think I got some, Raymond gave me some slack on that. So if there's another way to pronounce YAML, I'm curious. I thought YAML was the way to go, but apparently there may be another way of saying it.
I always say YAML because I'm not sure if it is pronounced as YAML. I'm not sure
Oh,
about that.
maybe I'll start a trend, or maybe people will say, never say that again. We'll find out if there's enough passion about it in our chat. If no one says anything, then I'm going to stick to YAML. So the other thing that's not part of our boilerplate code is the ability for me to just say, okay, and after I set the style, I also want to set the view model to be at a tilt of 45 degrees. By default, it's like you're looking like face down on the map, but what if I want to tilt it, give it a little, angle? That's all you have to do in order to initialize it to that. So that's fun. I also always add that, and you'll see this in a lot of our code examples, adding the resize event handler just makes sure that if we resize the screen for any reason, we don't have to worry about loss of things that were on the screen that should be there. So that's just a one-liner that kind of keeps you safe. With that stated, I would like to start introducing some more code. So I'm going to kind of push this up and start typing some more code that should be in this. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new thing called retail data. And I'm going to have that equal, it's going to be like a JSON object, but I'm just going to say it's going to initially have an ID that is blank. Whoops. And I also want to have an address that is also initially blank. And the reason why I'm doing that is that it's just going to be like a little, just a little in memory, or while this session is running, just a little thing to maintain some data. We don't know what ID is the retail shop is, and we don't know what its address is, but we will by the time we enable our drop-down menu and put the particular retail shop on the map somewhere. Then we're going to fill those pieces of data, but we're just creating this as a placeholder in the global space right now. And now that we have that, I also know that we're going to need to use our reverse geocoder. So it is going to be, I'll just make this as a const. I'll call it, or no, you know what? Actually, before I get into our service, what I really want to do is actually make sure I can get to the select object where we're doing the drop down of those retail stores. So I'll go to document, get element by ID, and I believe, if I'm correct on this,
001, right?
Let me just confirm that. I'm going to go into the index file, and the ID is retail ID. So I'll just copy that, put that in here. So I'm asking to get that. Now, for the next part, because I don't really want to do a long typing exercise, I'm just going to copy a snippet of code and place it in here, which will complement what we have so far. So I have the retail data here. You can see that it's being used in a couple locations. I also am using this retail select that's also being highlighted in a couple areas. So let me just do the little quick convert code into human language. So starting on line 38, we're saying, hey, if that drop down thingy changes, so someone selects something because it changed, then the first thing we're going to do is we're going to grab the value of whatever that was and put it into the ID of this retail data. So going back to this HTML, I'm either going to get a retail 01 or a retail 02, and I'm going to put that into this ID. Then I'm going to create a custom icon that's based on that ID. So that means it's expecting to find a retail 01 PNG or a retail 02 PNG. And fortunately, I have a retail 01 PNG, which I created with Snagit.
So
Same.
I
Go ahead.
I always have a doubt on this. Right, what should be the size of in pixel? If you have any idea about
Oh,
the
that's a great
size.
question. And I too also was curious about that question. The good news is that you are not constrained by our APIs in terms of what you're going to eventually use in terms of size. Like if I want a massive marker that's really big, I could. Now I'm going to let you know that I zoomed these in. So this is not really the size. I just wanted to kind of like zoom in on both of these. You could see that basically in Snagit, what I did is I took one of them and then I just recolored it something a little different, just so I can show two different shops, right? So our first one, the retail
Okay.
one, is more green. The next one, I guess, has a reddish color. So that's what it's going to be pulling up. So back to our code. Once we've loaded that icon, we're going to associate it with a marker. We're going to put it into the center of the map. That's what that init point was, what we talked about earlier. And we're going to make sure that the marker is draggable. So that's why we set the volatility to true. We also set its property to true, that it's draggable. Add it to the map. Say, hey, style of container of map, you may now reveal yourself. So as soon as we do the change, we'll see the map. And then the reason why we call the resize on the map is that basically triggers that it will actually show. So it's just kind of a trigger point to say, okay, show yourself. So if we do all of that right now, I am going to put you on the spot just a moment, but it's okay if you don't know the answer. And that is, if I run this code exactly the way we've just made it right now, do you believe that it will be a drag and drop marker with everything we did just now? Will it be fully functional?
Okay. So that's a tough question. It should be. We should be able to drag it, I think.
So what we're going to find out, we're going to go to the web page, and that's this one here in this corner here. I'm going to make sure that I have the most current version of what we've just done. And keep in mind that the trigger point here is if I choose something. So remember, I think retail 01 was greenish. Number 2 was like reddish. So I'll just choose 1. So we have the greenish marker there, right? So that's how it looks. Our groovy little retail store is now around. But if I try to grab it and move it around, you'll notice that the screen is like saying, what's up? Why are you moving
Nothing's
me
happening.
around like this?
Yeah.
It's not picking up that icon or that marker. And that's because we got to go back into the code and think about it. The reason why it isn't working is because we haven't instructed it. What is it supposed to
Mhm.
do when we drag
Yeah.
and drop it, right? So we need to enable some events. Now, again, this isn't necessarily anything that is like strikingly new from the last episode. So I'll be pasting a big chunk of code here in just a moment. But before
Okay.
I paste that in,
Meanwhile, you're pasting, let me tell you that there's a
please.
huge discussion going on YAML or YAML, or
And
should I
what
call
was
it.
the verdict so far?
So it's 50-50 because I think here Dave is saying that we can call it, and Kubera speaking saying that uh, we shouldn't. So we have to hold on, as in to see what the verdict goes. If anybody else wants to pitch in, want to say something, please drop a message.
Uh, so what would people recommend it's called if it's not YAML the way I like to call it? What are they saying it should be?
So I think what I'll say to everybody is do what you think is right. Call it YAML, call it camel, it's up to you. It should work properly. That's all I'm going to say.
That's so funny. Well, um, you know what's kind of interesting from my perspective is I really actually thought that that's what everyone always called it until it got challenged on the last episode by Raymond, and then all of a sudden I had a confidence issue with calling it YAML. So I know I'm safe to just say YAML, but that takes a lot of work, to say that. So I was kind of,
Yeah,
troubled.
true.
Okay, so one of the things that I just typed on the screen while we were having our YAML discussion or YAML discussion, is that I knew we're going to need to have a reverse geocoding service at some point. So I'm just going ahead and creating that service now. This platform object here was initialized up above when we created it up here on line 7. So that's just part of our standard, boilerplate initializations. So that's what we have there. The other thing that I'm going to bring into the fold is something that was also already discussed in the previous episode, but I'm going to use it again. It's a nice little helper function called getGeoLabel. So what that
Yeah.
does is it'll take any latitude and longitude and convert it into a friendlier looking label. So that's all that's there for. And now I am going to bring into the discussion, this is going to be all the dragging events, which I will not go through in detail because we did that on the last episode. I'm just going to say, as I collapse these, you have control as a developer over the start, the in between, and the end of the drag and drop. And right now, the thing that we're the most interested in doing is this area where it says, well, what are we going to do once we've dropped the retail thing in a location? So that's what we have to add next. So in order for that to work, I am going to drag and drop another function into this code, and it's called process marker. So that means up here, I'm going to remove this comment and I'm going to call that function process marker and pass in that target, because remember in the if statement that precedes it, it's saying if target is an instance of a marker. So we already have the guarantee that it is a marker.
Yep.
Whoops, unless I spell it wrong, it should be target. There we go. Now that I have it spelled correctly, it'll say, okay, take that target instance, pass it into this function, and now inside of this function, what do you want to do? So the first thing I'm going to do is called the get geometry of that object. And what that does is it basically just gives me a point, the geolocation of where the
Okay.
marker is. Then I'm going to call that get geolabel. That's the one that was up here on line 50. And I'm going to create a nice looking label that gives me the north, south, east, west, of the latitude and the longitude. I'm initializing this object that's going to be used a little later called spot. And then I'm calling our reverse geocode. And what I'm saying is go ahead and go at that location wherever we dragged and dropped that marker. And we want to get some information back, just default information back on whatever is at that point. So I'm grabbing the very first result that gets back. I'm also putting it in the console.log. And then lines 90 through 92 are essentially saying, hey, if on line 90, if we have a label, then proceed to the next expression. And that's like, okay, let's take that retail data object that we created earlier, and now let's set its address to equal spot.address.label, which will be the full address of that latitude and longitude, in a friendlier English or human speak. And then also we're going to add that address to our message that we're going to be putting in this info bubble. So those are all the things that are being added. The one thing that I also wanted to highlight up here in the event listener is we did all of these things with regard to, if getting the icon and putting the marker on, but we also set that ID. I just want to recall that in that retail, ID was set to whatever that was, retail 0, 1, or 2. And now down here, we're setting of the same object, we're setting its address. So this gives us the ability to identify retailer 1 and retailer 2, but also customize where we want their address to be at the time that we're running this app. So do we have any questions so far? Do you have any questions, or is there anything in our chat window?
Nothing. We just having a discussion on PHP.
On PHP. On PHP.
Yeah.
This is what happens when you are the one who's controlling the chat window. It becomes a PHP discussion. Interesting. All right.
It should be Python.
Oh, that's
I could
true.
Have
it should be Python, right? Yeah, you should have twisted it around. What are you doing?
Oh,
that's so funny.
I'm looking at your code. I'm finding it very interesting, actually. The dragging feature is something that I am loving it, actually. I'm going to try it out soon.
Yeah, you know what? What I found to be really helpful in this scenario is it gives us the ability to create a whole bunch of dynamic scenarios, which we'll see at the very end in the final episode. All these dynamic scenarios, because we can change dynamically where we want things to be at a certain time to do some different supply chain scenarios. So that's the reason why we're doing all this. But I agree with you. I like how easy it also is in our here APIs to do this drag and drop. So that's really good.
Okay,
so,
I think I have a query for me. So
yeah.
here Dave is asking, what does Python stand for? So basically it has a story. The person, Guru Van Rossum, who created Python at the time when he had written this language in, I think, late 80s, he was reading the scripts of Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he wanted an interesting name. So he took Python name from there. So it does not stand for anything. It's just the name that Guru Van Rossum, the creator of Python, gave it.
That is
Yeah.
Literally, that sounds like what a developer would do, or an engineer. Exactly. Especially Monty Python. That's pretty funny. All right, so I thought what I would do is go back into our into that page. Let me get this pulled up. I'm just going to refresh the screen all over again because I want to use the most current, version that we just did. And let's see if we at least have drag and drop working now. So down here, this time I'll put number 2. That's going to give us the red, retailer instead. And if I now move this around so we can see drag and drop is working, let me just move it like here. Now you're going to see that I'm getting this address, this 2216 3rd Avenue. So now I have the 2 things that I needed for my retail data. I have the ID, which is retail 2, and then I also have this address of where the product is currently located. So you with me so far?
Yeah.
All right.
I can see this info bubble where you can see the lat long and then you can see the address. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
exactly. So now that we have that information, what's going to be fun to do is actually start tying this into our MQTT stuff. So Richard might be waking up now. It's probably going to get more exciting. But I'm in the test area of our AWS IoT. And you probably remember we went through and we subscribed to and published to some topics on a previous episode. So what I'm going to do right now is there's a couple things that I want to call out in terms of like some tests. If you think about it, the role of retail is really between the consumer and the retailer,
Yep.
but we're also introducing this notion that there's also a delivery thing that needs to be done. So in terms of like a subscribe topic, what would you think? I mean, and again, this is from a demonstration purpose.
Okay.
The retailer is more interested in receiving what kind of information? What would you guess? And I don't mean technical. I mean in a business tomorrow, the retailer wants to have what?
The name of the product, the quantity.
So that would be the consumer probably. The consumer
Yeah.
wants to know about product and quantity, but I'll just say it. The retailer is interested in the consumer who wants to order from them, right? That's what they're interested in receiving is orders, right? So in our supply chain thing, I'm going to create under this SC domain, I'm going to create something called orders and I'm going to subscribe to it.
Okay.
So we have SC orders over here. And, I've got my classic little message that, is here by default when you're using AWS IoT. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste into that window right here. I'm just going to create like what I would call a sample order, right?
Okay.
So it might be a little hard to see. I'm going to see if I can just bump that up a little bit. So that you could see it's
Yeah.
just a JSON, where
Yeah, it's visible.
we have the order date. I'm going to bring it back down a little just because I need to see at least that much of the screen right there. But at least
Okay.
you could see that's all it is. It's order data. Now, I'm going to publish that.
Hmm.
That's exciting. So, I mean, all that means is if anyone cares, here we just published an order, right? I also want to subscribe to another topic. The subscription to this topic is going to be SC delivery. So SC delivery, I'll subscribe to it. So again, what that means is if anything is going to be publishing to delivery, we'll see that in here, correct?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page. When I go over to orders, let's say I change this to 2, 3, 4, 5 instead. If I publish to that, does that mean there's anything in delivery? If I go to delivery, will we see anything posted there? What do you think?
Since we have not subscribed to this, we should not be.
Yeah, we don't see anything. I mean, we've
Yeah.
subscribed to delivery, but
Yeah.
nothing has posted to delivery.
We are publishing on orders, so yeah.
Yeah, we're just publishing orders. I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. So I'm going to clear this right now. So we could publish again if we want to, but there's nothing in either one of these queues down here for data.
Mhm.
I'm going to go back over to our code view. This is where we're going to start to make our app interactive with MQTT. So the first thing that I want to establish out of all of this is an init function. So I'm going to bring that in right now. And if you want more detail on this, I would encourage anyone who is watching this that may have not seen episode 2. If you want more details on this, then please watch episode 2, where we do talk a little bit more about what it means to get the client and so forth. So let me explain at least in this scenario, what's going on, this init function, which ultimately is going to be called by an event handler, which I'm going to add right now, which means once we've loaded the DOM with all of its content, let's call this init function that we just created here on line 101. Once you've done that, go grab the client. That client is our MQTT client. Let's say that we're connected in the console, and let's immediately subscribe to the orders, right? So we want to subscribe to orders. Remember, that's what retailers care about. Give me orders. I want to make money. So that, as these orders come in. Now my question to you is this, Vidhan. If they're receiving orders and it's going to require delivery, what will they do? Will they subscribe to something else, or will they publish to something else? What would you think?
If we are talking about delivery data, right, the orders and all those details, then in that scenario, they'll have to subscribe to it, right, to get the information.
So
And
if we needed to get the transportation information because we were worrying about it, I would agree with you. But because in this scenario, we are going to be actually using a third-party company, when we get a message for orders, you see this orders? So for every order that comes in, we're going to process that message, and we're going to immediately create some publishing data saying, hey, I'm the retailer, here's the order, let's publish that to our delivery, to this delivery path that you see here.
so it will be published on AWS IoT, right?
That's correct. Right, to the delivery area. So think about, let's walk this through. Let's just talk briefly about what this means. Customer places an order, retailer receives the order. So they just received the order right here. And now through their highly efficient automation process, they're taking that order and they're also saying, hey, and here's info about me. And they're about to publish to this delivery service and say, go take care of the delivery of this product for all the data that's provided here.
Okay.
So
And
please.
okay, we are at 45 minutes mark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent. We're doing great. So what I want to show now is basically what is being accomplished in this scenario in terms of the communications. So I'm gonna now that we've made the changes here, I want to have a couple things on the screen again. First of all, I want to have the test back, because this is how we're going to do a measure of testing. Plus, I also want to see our retail demo, but I'm going to have to completely refresh it again because
We made changes in the code.
we've made changes to the code. So I'm pretty sure that we have the right information with us right now. So let me go ahead and select a retailer. So there's the retailer. And recall that when I just move this around to an area, it pops up here and it gives me an address. Now, I'm just going to read this to you. It's some random address in Seattle, but it's like 1427 4th Avenue in Seattle. So apparently that's where that retail shop now, that's where it now resides. I'm going to keep it just like that. I want to go back, look at the code, and just confirm this retailer is listening for orders, right? And if the order comes in to this retailer, then it gets processed immediately. So that means if I go back to both of these screens, go back to the test screen and also to our retail demo itself, let's see what happens when we publish this order that's on the screen right now.
Okay.
So you could see that the order has been published, right?
Yeah.
And the last time I talked to you, I said, if we publish an order, does that mean we'll see anything in delivery? And you said, no, but now we do. What we see now is the retailer, which is, yes, retailer 01 with their address, 14274 4th Avenue, which is what we have over here, and alas, the order itself. So in this scenario, what we've done is we've wired up our map so that the address data can be communicated through various parties.
Okay.
And now the next step that makes sense, or the two next steps are, we want to get this MQTT test client out of the picture eventually. Because when we place the order, like we did over here, what we really need to do is have a consumer place an order, right? And then who cares
Okay.
about
Yeah.
this delivery? No one is really subscribed to it yet. That's going to be the delivery company. So I'm just going to pause right there and just say what we've created is a bridge. And this bridge is, we need to have more code to represent how the consumer is not only going to place their order, but also how they're going to receive information about the status of their order. And likewise, we're going to have to eventually create delivery company algorithms that's going to say, now that we received from our retailer this particular data, which delivery operator out there is the most efficient one to select in order to carry out the task to get this to the consumer in the quickest amount of time. So I'm just giving you a little preview of some of the code that's going to be created in subsequent episodes of AWS Connections. So with that stated, I think that's pretty much the demo for this episode, but I want to make sure, are there any questions in our chat that we need to address?
There's Kubera speaking, asking that we will be publishing the part 2 of the video. I think here Dave has mentioned that it will be on YouTube. Apart from that, what I understood, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we have, say, a user who has an application, and that user is going to create an order and is going to click on the send or order button, and that order is going to go to the AWS broker, right? AWS IoT, and from there is going to reach the retailer, and retailer is going to take that order, and the retailer will respond back with its location and details to the delivery company, right? And from there, delivery company is going to pick it up, the information, and then is going to do all the logistics things from their end.
That's
right?
Correct. You got it, man. You just restated it. So that's what we're going to be doing in subsequent episodes. I have been so excited to build this content and share it. So it's going to be fun to see how these play out. But that's really the essence of today's episode. So when we say the role of retail, my goodness, the role of retail in the big picture of supply chain is far more complex than the very simplified version of what we've shown today. However, the whole point of this series is to help everyone understand how location services really is an integral part of the supply chain process. And especially, we're going to see how we could utilize some very cool features with location services. Again, from the consumer that just wants to know the status of their order, all the way up to the delivery company that can get an eagle-eye view of all the activity that's going on in their delivery service company. So it's going to be fun to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, and I find it very interesting, the example that you presented, because now I can imagine of a scenario where I have a retail shop, which is on the move, right? It does not have to be a brick and mortar, right? I could have a shop on a mini bus. It could be moving, and that is amazing, right? That kind of a thing that is interesting.
Yeah, in fact, we'll make sure that that on the final episode, we will provide you your mobile service. We'll make sure that we'll sync that in somehow. We'll make sure that that's a reality. Because what's fun about that one, the wrench that gets thrown in is that if the initial delivery service company receives the data that the retailer is at this location and then it changes, how will the transportation operator be notified and receive that information? So that could be a fun thing to add, in
Yeah.
terms of like a little complex scenario. But I would say, as far as like our code for the day, that's a wrap. I want to start getting into what we're going to be doing with regard to some upcoming activities. And so, first of all, Vidhan, you have the other track that's going on in AWS
Yeah.
Connections on IoT. What can we expect from you next Wednesday at 7:30 Pacific time?
So what we will be building is we will be working with Raspberry Pi gateway. We will be calling the map, right? The data that we are getting from our IoT endpoint will be presented on the gateway, and after that, we are going to send the data on the cloud. So we are going to introduce cloud there. So that is what we are going to concentrate on,
Now, on the
AWS
last
IoT cloud.
episode, you brought fire to the whole party.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any kind of special effects or techno things to look forward to in this next episode?
I have not thought about that, but now when you're saying it, then I'll try to bring something in.
Yeah, you got to bring something, because I think a lot of people like seeing you light things on fire, which was pretty interesting. Okay, so that's that. Plus, we have some office hours going on. I don't know if Trudy is still on. If she wants to plug into the chat what she's doing tomorrow, because I forgot what she's doing, but I know there's something interesting going on, I think, tomorrow. So if she's still listening and still wants to plug, go ahead and put that in the chat. Otherwise, it'll be 2 weeks from today that we will be returning for episode 4 for our supply chain. And the focus on that episode is going to be the consumer, the
Yeah.
role of the consumer, how they're going to place that order. And of course, we're going to see, again, some similar elements to what we've been doing. But at the same time, we're also going to start to gear away from being map centric when it comes to the consumer, and you'll see why when we get there. So that's going to be fun. The only other thing that I would say might be interesting to plug, and I wish I had the link for it. It might be something that either of the powers
We
that be could
have.
find. Is I think that we now have a link to some of the previous sessions for our directions sessions that were done last week. We had a company-wide virtual event called Directions. So if anyone's interested in that, either hopefully we'll see a link to that appear, or just do a search
Mhm.
for here.com/directions, or look at for sure, you could look at my Twitter alias Palermo4, because I've already posted that link there. So if it's not at on our chat, it will be at least somewhere on my Twitter feed. uh, do you have
And
anything else,
yeah,
Vidhan?
we are reading a channel, and this is by Ash Fox, and apparently he is doing hacking challenge on information security. So hang on and watch that channel. You might learn a lot of things regarding ethical hacking.
Cool. Okay, well, if there is nothing else, thank you, Peter, for at least plugging my alias so people can go on the hunt for the virtual directions stuff. That's going to call it for our episode today. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. And I guess I'm just going to ask the powers that be: are we rating something? Is that what we are doing, or no? That's what Vidhan just said. Okay, so see you over on the other side. Bye.